Well, I'm never confident with President Trump. I'm confident with Prime Minister Carney. I know he's going to do his very best to get a deal, but I don't trust President Trump.
For years, Doug Ford was one of Trump's quiet allies north of the border. From 2018 to 2022, even during tense trade disputes, the Ontario Premier often avoided public criticism of the U.S. president. But that chapter is now closed. With just days before Trump's August 1 tariff deadline, Ford is no longer holding back. He openly says he doesn't trust Trump, calls the proposed agreement a so-called deal, and is standing with other Canadian premiers in support of a new strategy. They're not waiting on Trump anymore. They're preparing to rewrite the rules. This shift isn't just political. It reflects a deeper change in how Canada and its provinces are confronting a trade war they no longer consider temporary.
We buy more products, Canada, than Japan, China, Korea, UK, and France combined. He needs to focus on his number one customer.
Ford's key message to the U.S. has been clear. Canada buys more American goods than Japan, China, Korea, the UK, and France combined. According to 2024 trade data, Canadian imports from the U.S. totaled $359 billion, while Japan bought only $79 billion. It's a strong point, simple, powerful, and aimed at American consumers and voters, but it may fall flat with Trump. This administration isn't rewarding past loyalty. Instead, Trump is focused on trade surpluses and future commitments. The deals he's already signed with Japan, the EU, and the UK were all based on new pledges to buy U.S. goods, not on who was the biggest customer yesterday. So Canada's moral leverage may not translate into negotiating power. The question is Trump even listening?
The New Brunswick lumber producers say they are deeply troubled by the decision to increase the duties by over 14% to negotiate a softwood lumber deal now than it has been in the past.
Minister LeBlanc, who's leading the trade discussions with the Americans on all commodities, now has softwood lumber on the top sheet.
Trump isn't pushing for a comprehensive trade deal. He's playing a tactical game, applying targeted tariffs to isolate industries, pressure regions, and weaken unity. First it was aluminum and steel, then autos, now it's softwood lumber. Just this month, the U.S. raised anti-dumping duties on Canadian softwood from an average of 7.66% to 20.56%, a jump of more than 14% according to the U.S. Commerce Department. Provinces like New Brunswick and British Columbia are already feeling the strain. Over 28,000 New Brunswickers alone work directly in forestry. This pressure is designed to splinter Canada's response, but it may be having the opposite effect. Faced with sector-by-sector attacks, Canada's premiers are banding together, meeting with Prime Minister Carney to align positions. The goal now is unity, not just resistance. While other countries sign deals based on baseline tariffs and investment pledges, Canada is taking a different approach. It's not asking for special treatment, it's reasserting its strategic value. Canada is the United States' most integrated trade partner, not just a buyer, but a supplier of critical energy, electricity, minerals, and technology. Much of the U.S. supply chain, from auto parts to semiconductors, runs through Canadian provinces. This isn't a bargaining chip that fits neatly into a buy more, pay less formula. It's structural leverage, and Canada is choosing to preserve it rather than cash it in for short-term relief. Carney and Ford aren't just reacting to pressure, they're playing for the long game. In February 2026, the USMCA, the existing North American trade agreement, enters its scheduled review. That's when the structure of the entire trading relationship can be renegotiated. By not locking into a rush deal now, Canada retains its flexibility for that much more consequential negotiation. This isn't a delay out of weakness, it's a deliberate pause. A signal that Canada is preparing to negotiate from strength, even if that means absorbing pain today for a better outcome tomorrow.
U.S. President Donald Trump showing no signs of backing down from his tariff agenda, as old complaints about Canada surface again, adding to the already tense relationship. Still, the Trump administration insists this is not the end of free trade with its neighbors.
When U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that free trade with Canada is still possible, many were surprised. After months of tariff threats, some reaching 35%, the tone suddenly seemed less absolute. But the question isn't whether Trump changed his mind. It's why. Something clearly shifted behind closed doors. Because even as Trump keeps the pressure high, Ottawa may be holding a card that Washington can't afford to lose. That card: Canada's role in energy, and more specifically, uranium.
The largest uranium mine comes out of Saskatchewan, comes over to Ontario, and then gets enriched down in the U.S.
Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft are all betting on nuclear energy to power their AI data center.
From California to Virginia, tech giants like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are expanding massive data centers. And all of them have one thing in common: they demand enormous amounts of electricity, clean, constant, and carbon-free. Nuclear power, once overlooked, is now back in the spotlight. And uranium, its essential fuel, is in short supply. The US has tried to revive domestic uranium production. In 2024, the US mined only 676,939 pounds, according to the US Energy Information Administration. That's less than 1.5% of the roughly 48 million pounds America currently needs each year. And the gap is only growing. Trump's own executive orders target 190 million pounds per year by 2050 as nuclear power quadruples to meet energy demand. But there's a problem. America now imports over 95% of its uranium. And the infrastructure for enrichment and processing is still dominated by Russia and China, two geopolitical rivals. That's why Canada's uranium supply is vital. The Cigar Lake mine in Saskatchewan, operated by Cameco, produces 11% of global uranium demand, and a significant, though undisclosed, portion heads directly into the U.S. nuclear fuel cycle. If Canada brings that leverage to the negotiating table, it could change everything. And uranium is just the beginning. Because beyond nuclear fuel, Canada also powers America through oil, gas, and electricity, resources equally hard to replace. Canada isn't just waiting for Trump's phone call, it's already shifting its energy exports away from the US. In July 2025, Canada shipped its first liquefied natural gas, LNG cargo, to South Korea from the massive LNG Canada terminal in British Columbia. With more LNG projects under development, like Cedar LNG and Woodfibre LNG, Canada is building new energy corridors to Asia. Meanwhile, uranium exports to the European Union are surging. France's EDF signed long-term contracts for Canadian uranium to help reduce EU dependence on Russian energy. And in this broader strategy, Trump's tariffs have ironically accelerated Canada's diversification. By turning to Asia and Europe, Ottawa has reduced its reliance on American buyers and increased its leverage in return. Of course, the US has other energy suppliers. Australia, for example, ships uranium to American utilities. But even that relationship is under strain. Trade tensions, especially over pharmaceutical pricing and rare earths, have begun to affect broader economic ties. Other past suppliers, like Russia and Belarus, are either sanctioned or politically untenable. What's left is a short list, and Canada is at the top. Not just for uranium, but also for nickel, aluminum, auto parts, and crude oil. Ontario alone holds the world's most accessible reserves of high-grade nickel, which is critical for electric vehicles, defense systems, and AI servers. With supply chains so closely tied, the message is hard to miss. The two economies are simply too integrated to pull apart.
Donald Trump has announced that he wants a golden age for the American economy. That means they're going to need more energy, more minerals, more steel and aluminum, more lumber, more concrete, more of the things that Canada is already sending them.
Uranium, and energy more broadly, isn't just a Canadian export, it's leverage. In a negotiation driven by tariffs and tension, it might be the key to securing a deal with Trump. That's why, despite all the pressure and posturing, a partial deal before August 1st remains on the table. Canada may agree to some targeted tariffs on autos or steel, but only if its core energy exports remain protected. Because in the end, this isn't just a trade fight. It's a test of how two deeply linked economies find balance in an era of brinkmanship.
With the trade war between Canada and the United States causing economic uncertainty, Canadian leaders are looking to Asia and Europe for reliable trade partners.
European negotiators say trade between the U.S. and EU could be effectively cut off if Trump goes ahead with a 30% tariff that he threatened over the weekend.
America's global influence was built not just on military power, but on long-standing partnerships, especially in trade. Today, that foundation is starting to break. If President Trump continues to raise tariffs on key allies, the United States risks more than short-term retaliation. It could lose its central role in the global economy. Canada is shifting its trade strategy. The European Union is preparing to strike back. And together, these moves are showing that the world may be ready to move on without U.S. leadership.
The deals are made. There are no deals to make. They would like to do a different kind of a deal, and we're always open to talk. We are open to talk, including to Europe. In fact, they're coming over, they'd like to talk.
President Trump believes that high tariffs will force other countries to accept better trade terms. But if those countries decide to stop relying on the U.S. altogether, the result could be long-term damage. When global supply chains adjust, the changes are not easily reversed. Companies may move production away from North America. Trade flows may shift permanently. Key U.S. industries, like finance, pharmaceuticals, and technology, could face new restrictions and rising costs in foreign markets. And once trading partners begin to rely less on U.S. systems, including the dollar and American tech platforms, the U.S. risks being left out of decisions that shape the global economy. The European Union is treating Trump's tariffs not just as an economic threat, but as a strategic rupture. Officials in Brussels say a 30% tariff on EU goods could effectively wipe out transatlantic trade. According to the European Commission, the U.S. imports more than $600 billion annually from the EU, while exporting only $370 billion. At first, the EU held back, pausing a $25 billion countermeasure package to allow for dialogue. But they've already prepared a larger $72 billion retaliation if talks collapse. Their strategy is twofold: de-escalate if possible, but punish if necessary. What's notable isn't just the scope of the response. It's the areas being targeted, U.S. services like finance and tech, where retaliation would hurt most.
Last month, you look at the data from Statistics Canada, which looks at the month of May, and we saw the highest amount of merchandise exports to non-U.S. countries since at least 2021.
Canada's response has been quieter, but no less consequential. After Trump's tariff announcement, exports to the U.S. dropped sharply. In May 2025, Statistics Canada reported just $41 billion in exports to the U.S., a 25% decline from January. Meanwhile, exports to non-U.S. countries rose to $19 billion, the highest since 2021. Canada is redirecting gold to the UK, oil to Singapore, pharmaceuticals to Italy. More than that, Canada is reopening dialogue with India, despite political tension. For Alberta and Saskatchewan, accessing India's pulse crop market is critical. This isn't just diversification, it's a structural shift. Prime Minister Mark Carney isn't threatening countermeasures. He's methodically building an economy that no longer depends on the U.S., a move supported by both policy and public sentiment. Trump's strategy is clear. He believes pressure forces deals. But pressure without flexibility can create fractures. The EU isn't folding, Canada isn't waiting. And if Trump continues down this path, America may win a few concessions, but lose the cohesion that once made it powerful. In trying to maximize leverage, Washington could undermine its own role in global leadership. Allies won't leave in anger. They'll simply move on, with new partners, new trade routes, and a future that no longer revolves around the U.S. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Trump's tariff play may feel strong in the short term, but the long game is different. And as Canada restructures and Europe prepares its counterpunch, one reality grows clearer. The world won't wait for America to lead. Not if it keeps pushing them away.